Hello, happy Sunday. We had a really huge rain this morning, and now it's just that sound of birds and the gray sky and the very tall grass growing. So, what's the weather like where you are? Is it a good day for reading? I think a day like today with the birds chirping, it's a little muggy in Louisiana, but you can see I'm short sleeves. Um, I always try and stay cool out on the porch, have the fan going, and listening to the birds talking after the rain. Hello, Fatima. I haven't talked to you in a while. So let's read. This is a continuation of learning about Monseigneur in the country. This is that rich nobleman. Um, and in my book, this teacher's guide that I don't think anybody has, is page 101. Congratulations to you. That's a huge accomplishment. I hope your family was able to be there with you because I know with Corona, a lot of the graduation ceremonies have been really abridged or made smaller, or some of them have just been virtual. So I hope that you celebrated, and congratulations to you. That's a big thing to feel proud of. And on to the next, whatever it is, whether it's work or college or trade school, whatever you're doing, I wish you the very best and that you have all success. So let's read chapter 8, Monseigneur in the country. It begins. A beautiful landscape. Hi, Dinah. With the corn bright in it, but not abundant, patches of poor rye where corn should have been, patches of poor peas and beans, patches of most coarse vegetable substitutes for wheat. On inanimate nature, as on the men and women who cultivated it, a prevalent tendency toward an appearance of vegetating unwillingly, a dejected disposition to give up and wither away. So we're setting the tone that everything is dying and it's less than it should be. It's a substitute. So we're staying with that theme of the poverty in France. Monsieur the Marquis in his traveling carriage, which might have been lighter, conducted by 4 post horses and 2 postilions, dragged up a steep hill. A blush on the countenance of Monsieur the Marquis was no impeachment of his high breeding. It was not from within. It was occasioned by an external circumstance beyond his control, the setting sun. The sunset struck so brilliantly into the traveling carriage when it gained the hilltop that its occupant was steeped in crimson. It will die out, said Monsieur the Marquis, glancing at his hands, directly. In effect, the sun was so low that it dipped at the moment. When the heavy drag had been adjusted to the wheel and the carriage slid downhill with a cinderous smell in a cloud of dust, the red glow departed quickly, the sun and the Marquis going down together. There was no glow left when the drag was taken off. But there remained a broken country, bold and open, a little village at the bottom of the hill, a broad sweep and rise beyond it, a church tower, a windmill, a forest for the chase, and a crag with a fortress on it used as a prison. Round upon all these darkening objects, as the night drew on, the Marquis looked with the air of one who was coming near home. So we started with him in the city. Now he's headed home to his country home. Fareed, 2 videos behind. Well, I've tried to get videos in, so. And yes, I believe Fatima did graduate high school, if I remember correctly. So this is going to be interesting that we've got these dualities again, Monseigneur in the city, Monseigneur in the country, and we see this constant compare-contrast throughout the whole story. The craftsmanship of the story is amazing. The village had its one poor street with its poor brewery, poor tannery, poor tavern, poor stable yard for relay of post horses, like the mail, poor fountain, all usual poor appointments. It had its poor people too, with all its people were poor, and many of them were sitting at their doors, shredding spare onions and the like for supper, while many were at the fountain, washing leaves and grasses and any such small yieldings of the earth that could be eaten. So it's a very small town and very poor town. Expressive signs of what made them poor were not wanting. The tax for the state, the tax for the church, the tax for the Lord, tax local and general, were to be paid here and to be paid there, according to solemn inscription in the little village, until the wonder was that there was any village left unswallowed. So this was the time, the taxes, everybody 90+% of the population was made out of the people. There were nobilities, clergy, and then the people. So the people that were noble, that were of king or queen or lord or lady descent, the clergy, which are the religious people, and then the bulk of all the craftsmen, the workers, the field people. So 99% or 95% of the community was made up of that. The news was also, they called them the estates. So the third estate. And the taxes, the two wealthiest estates didn't pay any tax. So the burden was upon the backs of this third estate, the very, very poor. And it set up all this resentment. And so this is reinstating all of this information about history. I mean, the actual history, the setting, the historical setting. Few children were to be seen and no dogs. As to what happened to the dogs, they got eaten. As to the men and women, their choice on earth was stated in the prospect. Life on the lowest terms that could sustain it, down in the little village under the mill, or captivity and death in the dominant prison on the crag. Heralded by a courier in advance, and by the cracking of postilions' whips, which twined snake-like about their heads in the evening air, as he became attended by the Furies, Monsieur the Marquis drew up his traveling carriage at the posting-house gate. It was hard by the fountain, and the peasants suspended their operations to look at him. He looked at them, and saw in them, without knowing it, the slow, sure filing down of misery-worn face and figure that was to make the meagerness of Frenchman and English superstition, which should survive the truth through the best part of 100 years. Monsieur the Marquis cast his eyes over the submissive faces that drooped before him, as the like of himself had drooped before Monseigneur the court. Only the difference was that these faces drooped merely to suffer and not to propitiate, when a grizzled mender of the roads joined the group. "Bring me hither that fellow," said the Marquis to the courier. The fellow was brought, cap in hand, and the other fellow closed round to look and listen in the manner of the people at the Paris fountain. "I passed you on the road?" "Monseigneur, it is true. I had the honor of being passed on the road." "Coming up the hill and at the top of the hill, both?" "Monseigneur, it is true." "What did you look at so fixedly?" "Monseigneur, I looked at the man." He stooped a little, and with his tattered blue cap pointed under the carriage, all his fellows stooped to look under the carriage. "What man, pig? And why look there?" "Pardon, Monseigneur, we swung by the chain of the shoe." "He swung by the chain of the shoe, the drag." "Who?" demanded the traveler. "Monseigneur, the man." "May the devil carry away these idiots. How do you call the man? You know all the men of this part of the country. Who was he?" "Your clemency, Monseigneur. He was not part of this county. Of all the days of my life, I never saw him. Swinging by the chain, to be suffocated." "With your gracious permission, that was the wonder of it, Monseigneur. His head was hanging over, like this." He turned himself sideways to the carriage, and leaned back with his face thrown up to the sky and his head hanging down, then recovered himself, fumbled with his cap, and made a bow. "What was he like?" "Monseigneur, he was whiter than the miller, all covered with dust, spectre as a spectre, tall as a spectre, like a ghost." He's describing this man that was like stowed away on the coach. The picture produced an immense sensation in the little crowd, but all eyes, without comparing notes with other eyes, looked at Monsieur the Marquis, perhaps to observe whether he had any spectre on his conscience. "Truly you did well," said the Marquis, felicitously, happily sensible that such vermin, rats, were not to ruffle him. "To see a thief accompanying my carriage, and not open that great mouth of yours, bah! Put him aside, Monsieur Gabelle." Monsieur Gabelle was the postmaster, and some other taxing functionary united. He had come out with great obsequiousness to assist at this extermination, and had held the examined by the drapery of his arm in an official manner. "Bah! Go aside," said Monsieur Gabelle. "Lay hands on the stranger if he seeks to lodge in your village tonight, and be sure that his business is honest, Gabelle." Oh, the neighbor's dogs are out. "Monsieur, I'm flattered to devote myself to your orders." "Did he run away, fellow? Where is that accursed?" The accursed was already under the carriage, with some half-dozen particular friends pointing out the chain with his blue cap. Some half-dozen other particular friends promptly hauled him out and presented him breathless to Monsieur the Marquis. "Did the man run away, dolt, when we stopped for the drag?" "Monsieur, he precipitated himself over the hillside, head first, as a person plunges into a river. See to it, Gabelle. Go on. The half-dozen who were peering at the chain were still among the wheels, like sheep. The wheels turned so suddenly that they were lucky to save their skins and bones. They had very little else to save, or they might have been not been so fortunate. They were so skinny they could hide in there. The burst with which the carriage started out of the village and up the rise beyond was soon checked by the steepness of the hill. Gradually it subsided to a foot pace, swinging and lumbering upward among the many sweet scents of a summer night. The postilions, with 1,000 gossamer gnats circling about them in lieu of the furies. The furies are a reference to the Greek furies. I can't think of how to describe them, but you can look that up. Or Dinah, if you're there, you can look it up and tell us. So the furies, it's this illusion, this historical or literary illusion. Quietly mended the points to the lashes of their whips. The valet walked by the horses. The courier was audible, trotting on ahead into the dim distance. At the steepest point of the hill, there was a little burial ground with a cross and a new large figure of our Savior on it. It was a poor figure in wood, done by some inexperienced rustic carver, but he had studied the figure from the life, his own life maybe, for it was dreadfully spare and thin. To this distressful emblem of a great distress that had long been growing worse and was not at its worst, a woman was kneeling. She turned her head as the carriage came up to her, rose quickly, and presented herself at the carriage door. It is you, Monseigneur. Monseigneur, a petition to this old lady that had been praying at this kind of graveside, comes up to talk to the Monseigneur. With an exclamation of impatience, but with his unchangeable face, Monseigneur looked out. How then? What is it? Always petitions. Monseigneur, for the love of the great God, my husband, the forester. What of your husband, the forester? Always the same with you people. He cannot pay something. He has paid all, Monseigneur. He is dead. Hello, Georgios. Well, he is quiet. Can I restore him to you? Alas, no, Monseigneur. But he lies yonder, under a little heap of poor grass. Well, Monseigneur, there are so many little heaps of poor grass. Again, well, like, what's your point? Thank you for being your inspiration to read, or your inspiration to read on YouTube, or your inspiration to do well in school. What am I inspiring you to do, Georgios? She looked an old woman, but was young. So she's so skinny from hunger and malnutrition and grief that she looks like an old lady, but she's probably in her 30s or younger at that time. Her manner was one of passionate grief. By turns, she clasped her veinous and knotted hands together with wild energy and laid one of them on the carriage door, tenderly caressing as if it had been a human breast and could be expected to feel the appealing touch. Monseigneur, hear me. Monseigneur, hear my petition. My husband died of want. My husband died of hunger, want. He doesn't have enough. Greek furies. Vengeance for vengeance. So they swarm about. Thank you, Dinah. You need to join. I'm answering you, Georgios. I don't usually go. I just go when I feel like it and get on. But if you join Discord, and I'll post that when this is done, or if one of you guys can send an invite to the live feed, Dinah, maybe you could do that. I try and always go into Discord and say, hey guys, I'm about to read live, because I never really know when I'm going to read live. Sorry about that. So he died of want. He died of hunger because he didn't have, if you want something, you don't have enough food, you don't have enough money. He died of want. The good nut. Well, can I feed them? No. My husband died of want. So many die of want. So many more will die of want. And he doesn't care. Again, well, can I feed them? Monseigneur, the good God knows, but I don't ask it. My petition is that a morsel of stone or wood with my husband's name may be placed over him to show where he lies. She wants a grave marker. Otherwise, the place will be quickly forgotten. It will never be found when I am dead of the same malady. I shall be laid under some other heap of poor grass. Monseigneur, there are so many. They increase so fast. There is so much want. Monseigneur, she's begging. She's like, oh, please tell us, you know, that you can help us. We're all dying of hunger. The economy is terrible. You guys have everything you can want, you rich, and you keep taxing us. And he doesn't care. The valet had put her away from the door. The carriage had broken into a brisk trot. The postilions had quickened the pace. She was left far behind, and Monseigneur, again escorted by the Furies, was rapidly diminishing. That's a metaphor. He's not really escorted by Greek gods that are out for vengeance. It's all these little bugs. Or was rapidly diminishing the league of two distance that remained between him and his chateau. Chateau is his big home, like mansion. The sweet scents of the summer night rose all around him, and rose as the rain falls impartially on the dusty, ragged, and toil-worn group at the fountain not far away, to whom the mender of roads, with the aid of the blue cap, without which he was nothing, still enlarged upon his man like a spectre, as long as they could bear it. By degrees, as they could bear no more, they dropped off one by one, and the lights twinkled in little casements, which lights, as the casements darkened, and more stars came out, seemed to have shot up into the sky instead of having been extinguished. The shadow of a large, high-roofed house and of many overhanging trees was upon Monsieur the Marquis by that time, and the shadow was exchanged for the light of a flambeau, as like a lantern. The carriage stopped, and the great door of the chateau was opened to him. Monsieur Charles, whom I expect, is he arrived from England? Monsieur, not yet. So that's only 16 minutes. Let's see how long the next. Oh, it is chapter 9 is kind of long, but let's keep going. Teen Idol. Oh, Georgios, that is such a hard call. This is one of my favorite books, A Tale of Two Cities. It's just a great story of humanity and sacrifice. I think I think A Thousand Splendid Suns, which is also on my playlist, is one of my top favorites. And the Ernest Gaines stories, either A Gathering of Old Men or A Lesson Before Dying. I think the story's better in A Lesson Before Dying, but A Gathering of Old Men, I love the old men. Cry the Beloved Country. That is a sweet, sweet story. It is a very sweet story. I don't know that it's my favorite, though, but it is a really good story, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. Teen Idol, I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. And this little break before I keep reading chapter 9, which is on page 106, The Gorgon's Head. So let's look up a gorgon just so you can see it visually. If you're with me, Google that on your phone so you can see gorgon. It's kind of like a gargoyle. Gorgon. Let's see if I can get an image of it. Yeah. From the Greek. Let's see what it's like. A Medusa. Gorgons occur in the earliest examples of Greek literature. While descriptions of gorgons vary, the term most commonly... Sorry, I'm on Wikipedia. Oh, I hope to get to Athens one day. That's one of the countries I've not been to, and my son's favorite. So we've got a lot of reference to the Greek gods at this point. So my youngest son and I keep dreaming of going. We have a friend who lives there, so we might try and get there. So you have to make, if you're in AP and you keep hearing these, we have the reference to the Furies and we have the reference to the Gorgons. What is Dickens' interest in making these Greek mythology references? There's going to be a point to it. The three sisters who are described as having hair made of living, like Medusa, remember her from Disney movies, venomous snakes. So let's see if I can show you a picture of a gorgon. Images. Can you guys see? I don't know if that shows with the reflection, but you can always Google it. And I really encourage you, when you hear a reference, give it a little background information for it. I know so often you're just trying to get through your homework, but give it that reference and it'll help you have a richer understanding of what the author is trying to tell you. So this one is called The Gorgon's Head. It was a heavy, massive building, that chateau of Monsieur the Marquis, with a large stone courtyard before it, and 2 stone sweeps of staircase meeting in a stone terrace before the principal door. A stony business altogether, with heavy stone balustrades and stone urns. If you've been to France, a lot of the old homes are those heavy, built out of just solid pieces of stone. The outside is carved in stone. It's just part of the French landscape. You don't see many stone houses in Louisiana. We have mainly wood or siding. A stony business altogether, with heavy stone balustrades and stone urns and stone flowers and stone faces of men and stone heads of lions in all directions, as if the Gorgon's head had surveyed it when it was finished 2 centuries ago. So there's a Gorgon engraved in the stone. Up the broad flight of shallow steps, Monsieur the Marquis Flambeau proceeded, went from his carriage, sufficiently disturbing the darkness to elicit loud remonstrance from an owl in the roof of the great pile of stable building away among the trees. All else was so quiet that the flambeau carried up the steps, and the other flambeau held at the great door, burnt as if they were in a close room of state, instead of being in the open night air. Other sound than the owl's voice there was none, saving the falling of a mountain into its stone basin, for it was one of those dark nights that hold their breath by the hour together, and then heave a long, low sigh and hold their breath again. Now, I will tell you, these passages are laying foundation for an important event. I kind of lost interest again in this story. I had trouble getting into the story at the very beginning. Then I began to lose interest when we shifted over to this portion about the Monseigneur. But all of this is laying foundation that's going to be important to the story. If you wanted to skip through, I would encourage you to, but you do need to read this chapter because important things are going to happen. But I do encourage you when you're reading to kind of skim through. If I weren't reading this for YouTube, I would kind of skip over some of this. But if you're reading for AP, notice the weight. The stone is cold. It's heavy, it's lifeless. So he's really setting up, it's powerful, it's strong. He's setting up a lot of parallels and metaphors about the Monseigneur and this house that he lives in and how it represents him. The great door clanged behind him, and Monsieur, sorry, I'm just not used to this name, and Monsieur the Marquis crossed a hall grim with certain old boar spears, swords, and knives of the chase. Grimmer with certain heavy riding rods and riding whips, of which many a peasant, gone to his benefactor death, had felt the weight when his lord was angry. So we learn again how cruel he was. He would whip them with his whip. Avoiding the larger rooms, which were dark and made fast for the night, they were closed up. Monsieur the Marquis, with his flambeau bearer going on before, went up the staircase to a door in a corridor. This thrown open admitted him to his own private apartment of 3 rooms, his bedchamber, and 2 others. High vaulted rooms with cool, uncarpeted floors, great dogs upon the hearths for the burning of wood in wintertime, and all luxuries befitting the state of a marquis in a luxurious age and country. The fashion of the late Louis, but one of the line that was never to break, the 14th Louis, was conspicuous in their rich furniture, but it was diversified by many objects that were illustrations of old pages in the history of France. A supper table was laid for 2. In the third of the rooms, a round room in one of the chateau's 4 extinguisher-topped towers, a small lofty room with its window wide open and the window jealousy blinds closed, so that the dark night only showed in slight horizontal lines of black, alternating with the broad lines of stone color. "My nephew," said Marquis, glancing at the supper preparation. "They said he has not arrived." So he's there waiting for someone to arrive, and it turns out to be his nephew. Nor was he. He had been expected with Monseigneur. It was not probable he will arrive tonight. Nevertheless, leave the table as it is. I shall be ready in a quarter of an hour. In a quarter of an hour, Monseigneur was ready and sat down alone to his sumptuous and choice supper. His chair was opposite to the window, and he had taken his soup and was raising his glass of Bordeaux to his lips when he put it down. "What is that?" he calmly asked, looking with attention at the horizontal lines of black and stone color. "Monseigneur? That? Outside the blinds. Open the blinds." It was done. "Well, Monseigneur, it is nothing. The trees and the night are all that are here." The servant who spoke had thrown the blinds wide, had looked out into the vacant darkness, and stood with that blank behind him, looking round for instructions. "Good," said the imperturbable master. "Close them again." So he thinks he's seen something. That was done too, and the Marquis went on with his supper. He was halfway through it when he again stopped with his glass in his hand, hearing the sound of wheels. It came on briskly and came up to the front of the chateau. Ask who has arrived. It was the nephew. It was the guest he was expecting. The nephew of Monseigneur. He had been some few leagues behind Monseigneur early in the afternoon. He had diminished the distance rapidly, but not so rapidly as to come upon with Monseigneur on the road. He had heard of Monseigneur at posting houses as being before him. So they were in two different carriages, and this nephew arrives after Monseigneur. He was to be told, said Monseigneur, that supper awaited him then and there, and that he was prayed to come to it. In a little while, he'd been known in England. In a little while, he came. He had been known in England as Charles Darnay. Now, remember our character, Charles Darnay. Monseigneur received him in a courtly manner. He's now the nephew of this terrible man. And he was the one that was accused of being, no, yes, he was the one accused of being the, I want to make sure I've got the right thing, the spy. But he also is legal, but that doesn't seem right. He was the one looking up the whole time. Sidney Carton was the one accused of being the spy, right? Let me get to it. Cruncher, treason. Dinah, if you're there, help me keep track. I tell you, I always lose track of my characters. Made a huge understanding over Charles Darnay, the sort. Silence I tried yesterday, pleaded not guilty. Yeah, Charles Darnay had been the one that was being accused of being a spy. And Sidney Carton, I always get these two characters mixed up. Sidney was the attorney that is the jackal. Remember we read about them? So it turns out Charles Darnay. Now these things are going to get really tricky. So if you're taking notes, keep track of your characters because you see how quickly I lose track. Charles Darnay is the nephew of this awful Monseigneur. So that makes him royal. Monseigneur received him in a courtly manner, but he did not shake hands. You left Paris yesterday, sir, he said to Monseigneur as he took a seat at table. Yesterday. And you? I come direct. From London? Yes. You've been a long time coming. It's taken you a long time to get here, said the Marquis with a smile. On the contrary, I come direct. Pardon me. I mean, not a long time on the journey, a long time intending the journey. It's taken you a long time to decide to come. I've been detained by, the nephew stopped a moment in his answer, various business. Without doubt, said the polished uncle. So long as the servant was present, no other words passed between them. When coffee had been served and they were alone together, the nephew, looking at the uncle and meeting the eyes of the face that was like a fine mask, opened a conversation. I have come back, sir, as you anticipate, pursuing the object that took me away. It carried me into great and unexpected peril, but it is a sacred object, and if it had carried me to death, I hope it would have sustained me. Not to death, said the uncle. It is not necessary to say to death. I doubt, sir, returned the nephew, whether if it had carried me to the utmost brink of death, you would have cared to stop me there. The deepened marks in the nose and the lengthening of the fine straight lines in the cruel face looked ominous as to that. The uncle made a graceful gesture of protest, which was so clearly a slight form of good breeding that it was not reassuring. Indeed, sir, pursued the nephew, for anything I know, you may have expressly worked to give a more suspicious appearance to the suspicious circumstances that surrounded me. No, said the uncle pleasantly. But however that may be, resumed the nephew, glancing at him with deep distrust, I know that your diplomacy would stop me by any means and would know no scruples as to means. He doesn't trust him. He thinks he might have been behind the whole thing. My friend, I told you so, said the uncle with a fine pulsation in the 2 marks. Do me the favor to recall that I told you so long ago. I recall it. Thank you, said the Marquis, very sweetly indeed. His tone lingered in the air, almost like the tone of a musical instrument. In effect, sir, pursued the nephew, I believe it to be at once your bad fortune and my good fortune that has kept me out of prison in France here. I do not quite understand, returned the uncle, sipping his coffee. Dare I ask you to explain? I believe that if you were not in disgrace with the court and had not been overshadowed by that cloud for years past, a letter de cachet would have sent me to some fortress indefinitely. The only reason that, like, we clearly see that the uncle, the Marquis, doesn't like Darnay, doesn't like his nephew. And the nephew's saying, if you had a better standing, you would have been able to do something about it. But so now we know more that he really has lost his power in the community, in the nobles. It is possible, said the uncle with great calmness. For the honor of the family, I could even resolve to incommode you to that extent. Pray, excuse me. I perceive that, happily for me, the reception of the day before yesterday was, as usual, a cold one, observed the nephew. I would not say happily, my friend, returned the uncle with refined politeness. I would not be sure of that. A good opportunity for consideration, surrounded by the advantages of solitude, might influence your destiny to far greater advantage than you influence it yourself. But it is useless to discuss the question. I am, as you say, at a disadvantage. These little instruments of correction, these gentle aids to the power and honor of families, these slight favors that might so incommode you, are only to be obtained now by interest and importunity. They are sought by so many, and they are granted comparatively to so few. It used not to be so, but France and all such things is changed for the worse. So it's worse for those nobles that wanted to use their privilege and their prestige to harm people. Those days, he's saying, are gone. And the fact that Dickens uses this sense of the uncle answers in refined politeness. He's used to smiling and speaking very diplomatically, but he doesn't have to get into the gutter and be, crass and aggressive and threatening, because he was, thank you, Dinah. I'm looking to see. Defarge was Mr. Manette's former servant, and Darnay was accused of, and this is Charles Darnay, that's the nephew. So I've come back right in my mind. It just takes me a minute to remember all the connections. But Dickens is showing the reader that even though the Marquis speaks politely and graciously, he's not to be trusted. He's just practiced at it. He's used to speaking this way out of his privilege. And so we don't want to trust him. Our not remote ancestors held the right of life and death over the surrounding vulgar. From this room, many such dogs have been taken out to be hanged. In the next room, my bedroom, one fellow, to our knowledge, was poniarded on the spot for professing some insolent delicacy respecting his daughter. His daughter. We have lost many privileges. So we used to get away with everything in our home, in our bedroom, and now if we do something wrong, we're held accountable for it. And he's expressing outrage at that, where Dickens is letting us know Dickens supports that shift in society. We have lost many privileges. A new philosophy has become the mode, and the assertion of our station in these days might, I do not go so far as to say would, but might, real inconvenience. All very bad, very bad. The Marquis took a gentle little pinch of snuff and shook his head, as elegantly despondent as he could becomingly be of a country still containing itself that great means of regeneration. We have so asserted our station, both in the old time and in the modern time also, said the nephew gloomily, that I believe our name to be more detested than any name in France. Our family name, we're despicable people. Carton always looks at the ceiling. Yeah. Carton was the one that became the jackal. So Darnay is the French connection and Carton is the British connection, but they're the two men that look so much alike. Barsad and Cly are the spies. Yes, but Darnay was on trial for this. Thank you, Dinah. That helps me get it all back together. Yep. Thank you. And we've not seen the last of Barsad and Cly. So thank you for keeping Defarge is in. He's the one with Madame Defarge who knits, and they're the ones that are in France. So those of you that are in school doing this, I would really keep a record of your characters as French connections and London connections and kind of track them that way, because they will all come full circle and keep connecting to one another. So Dinah, thank you for that. I think I'm going to finish this page and then stop. So everybody hates this family, the Marquis family. Notice we haven't heard a name yet. Let us hope so, said the uncle. Detestation of the high is involuntary homage of the low. There is not, pursued the nephew in his former tone, a face I can look at in all this country round about us, which looks at me with any deference on it, but the dark deference of fear and slavery. A compliment, said the Marquis, to the grandeur of the family, merited by the manner in which the family has sustained its grandeur. Ha! He took another gentle little pinch of sniff and lightly crossed his legs. But when his nephew, leaning an elbow on the table, covered his eyes thoughtfully and dejectedly with his hand, the fine mask looked at him sideways with a stronger concentration of keenness, closeness, and dislike than was comportable with its wearer's assumption of indifference. So we get a peek into the Marquis's character. He really hates his nephew. Repression is the only lasting philosophy. The dark deference of fear and slavery, my friend, observed the Marquis, will keep the dogs obedient to the whip. How many times does he allude to these humans as animals, either rats or dogs? And I've said in other things, remember when a group of people are identified or aligned to animals, it is a tactic to dehumanize that group of people by the ruling power. And it's very important, no matter how much you dislike someone, that you don't try and take away his or her humanity. That if you have a personal objection to a group of people, it's very important that you always acknowledge their humanity. And it's important for your own well-being as well as theirs, because when you begin to lose sight of the humanity of human beings, you yourself become less humane and less, you see what the Marquis has become. So he's referenced him as dogs. Let's see where it was. And will keep the dogs obedient to the whip as long as this roof, looking up to it, shuts out the sky. That might not be so long as the Marquis supposed. If a picture of the chateau as it was to be a very few years hence, and of 50 like it as they were to be a very few years hence, could have been shown to him that night, he might have been at a loss to claim his own for the ghastly, fire-charged, plunder-wrecked ruins. As for the roof, so there's foreshadowing. As for the roof he vaunted, he might have found that shutting out the sky in a new way, to wit, forever, from the eyes of the bodies into which its lead was fired, out of the barrels of 100,000 muskets. Meanwhile, said the Marquis, I will preserve the honor and repose of the family if you will not. But you must be fatigued. Shall we terminate our conference for the night? A moment more. An hour, if you please. Sir, said the nephew, we have done wrong and are reaping the fruits of wrong. We have done wrong, repeated the Marquis with an inquiring smile and delicately pointing first to the nephew, then to himself. Our family, our honorable family, whose honor is of so much account to both of us in such different ways. Even in my father's time, we did a world of wrong, inuring every human creature who came between us and our pleasure, whatever it was. Why need I speak of my father's time when it is equally yours? Can I separate my father's twin brother, joint inheritor, and next successor from himself? So we have another piece of information. Darnay's father is the twin of this horrific Marquis. Death has done that, and now we know he's dead, said the Marquis. And has left me, answered the nephew, bound to a system that is frightful to me, responsible for it, but powerless in it, seeking to execute the last request of my dear mother's lips, and to obey the last look of my dear mother's eyes, which implored me to have mercy and to redress, and tortured by seeking assistance and power in vain. So here's a twist, and an important twist. Darnay's mother asked him to make a dying wish to be different, and that's going to guide so much of this story. I'm going to stop there because it's too long to finish in this setting, and I don't want to read so far that the next one would be too short. So if you have questions, ask them. Dinah, you are always so helpful, and I appreciate that. I will drop in the, I will post in the comments section or the description section the link to Discord. So those of you that want to join us on Discord, you can do that. And if you guys know of any good character charts like on Pinterest, maybe put them, but I really encourage you to have them by organized by France, connections to France, and some are going to overlap and to England. And you'll begin to see the parallels because there are foils on each side. Really exciting story. I know it's a little slow. He builds it slowly, tediously. And the first read, you're going to miss so many things because you don't know the endings. You don't know that, oh, that's going to be why this happens. And that character is why that happens. So you need to kind of pay attention to it. And Dinah, thank you, Defarge is described as sinister and as untrustworthy. And he and his wife are interesting characters, and they're so representative of the history of the time. Guys, I really appreciate your time with me. It makes me happy to know that you're out there reading. We've got people in India reading. We've got people in California and New York reading. We've got people all over the world. We've got regulars like Dinah and Farid, Fatima, different people that come regularly and join the read. Miss Yara, my granddaughter, who watches every now and then. I don't think she would watch to the end, however. So you guys keep reading, keep picking up books, keep giving me suggestions. And some of you maybe should consider starting your own YouTube channel. It's not competition. There are so many books out there that need to be read every single day. Not every single day, but at least once a week, I have to tell people, I'm sorry, I won't be able to get that book read in the time that you want it done. So enjoy your Sunday. It's very muggy here. I can feel those furies, as they describe them, wanting to circulate, but I've got my screened-in porch so they can't get me. But it is mosquito season in Louisiana. So humid, sticky, muggy Louisiana. Welcome. Come see us. And Dinah, thank you. I know you'll send me something amazing. So I will read to you next time. See ya.